All right, for those of you tuning in here virtually or watching the recordings, we apologize that some of the dialogue amongst the crowd will not be heard. We'd like to reiterate the importance of being here in person and sharing and developing that network. That's where impact's made, so we look forward to seeing you at that next event. All right, we're all settled in. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you again to Pioneer Bank and James Gordon for facilitating the space and being so accommodating. I'd like to thank GreenSeam investors, the GreenSeam Retention and Expansion Committee for starting this Global Workforce Opportunities event. I'd like to thank Sam and Michaela, staff of GreenSeam, and all those other supporters and those others along the way that have contributed to GreenSeam, as really we're here to support businesses, communities, and people across the region. And this is just one element of the work that GreenSeam does. On the agenda, you'll see that it's two-sided. Don't get confused between the April 6th event that we previously held and today's event. But that April 6th is more of a just a little background so you can see what were some of the topics that were discussed at the previous event. And maybe there's a speaker on there that you'd like to connect with. Please send me an email and we'll be happy to make those introductions. That's what it's all about. The previous events that we've explored are TN visas and H-2As and really other employment visa types. We've really explored how organizational and communities really have addressed some of these challenges and showcased the opportunities. It certainly is a learning environment, but food and ag for a long time has utilized a lot of these different type of employment-based visas, and so we wanted to share that with healthcare, with manufacturing, the service industry, and beyond. I think it's a great asset to the region. And so today's topic is really focused on the international students, taking that step back and more forward, actually, from your boots on the ground or seasonal labor to looking at your TNs and professional labor. We have a tremendous asset with MSU and different universities in South Central College and Southwest Minnesota State that have more than 3,000 students across the region. It's an untapped potential, and employers have often looked at that as a complicated manner, and there's a lot of challenges. And so today is really to showcase what is the pathway, what are the opportunities, what are some of the considerations that you should understand as an employer, as an organization, and to know that there is a way. And so we're here to showcase that. We have attendees here today from higher ed, industry, communities. They're all here to learn about the challenges and opportunities in those pathways to support those international students and graduates from across the region that are looking for a place to support industry. We will allow for some time at the end of each presenter for Q&A, but if time runs short, we will continue moving forward, and please save those questions for the end. We'll have a bit of a Q&A and a panel here for those that are able to stick around. Now, the introduction to Aaron. Aaron has supported the global workforce really from its inception, and I think was a big contributing factor. How are we supposed to do this without a legal understanding of what works and what doesn't, and what is that pathway? And so Aaron has returned, and Aaron actually is the attorney and owner of Kivu Immigration Law out of Worthington, where she returned several years ago after getting her bachelor's degree from Yale and her law degree from UConn. She then worked for 6 years in Yale's Office of International Affairs, and again returned back to Minnesota in 2018, where she started Kivu. She received the Initiator's Fellowship to launch Kivu Immigration Law, a social enterprise law firm that provides full representation on immigration-related legal matters for immigrants, their families, and employers. Again, Kivu is located in downtown Worthington and serves clients virtually across several states. Today, Aaron is going to be really talking about and showcasing how to navigate that legal process to obtain that international talent from the colleges and universities across our region and beyond. So please help me welcome our first presenter, Aaron.
Good afternoon, everyone. Garrett, thank you so much for inviting me to this wonderful event. This is the second time I've been able to join a GreenSeam event in this beautiful building. And I just have to say that the drive up from Worthington was just absolutely gorgeous with the colorful fall leaves. And I didn't realize how cold and windy it was until I got out of the car. So, but I really appreciate the opportunity to join you all today. Before I dive in, I would love to know more about who's in the room, and so I'm wondering if we could just do a quick introductions, and maybe you might be interested in who's in attendance as well. So if you can just say your name and the organization or industry or university that you're affiliated with, that would be wonderful. Can we start here? Awesome. Well, great group of people in the room today. And my goal for the next 35, 40 minutes or so is just to give you a big picture look at what opportunities are available for international students during college and after graduation. So we're going to cover some general overview of the immigration system. That's my bread and butter as an immigration attorney, giving people advice on what opportunities are available to them. And it's important, if you are going to be interacting with international students, that you have a general idea of what options are available to them. 30,000-foot level. We will also talk about internships available for international students, short-term employment opportunities, and when I say short-term, I say anywhere from 1 to 3 years, and then also long-term or permanent employment opportunities for international graduates. If anyone has any questions throughout the presentation, don't hesitate to raise your hand or interrupt me. I'm happy to have this be a dialogue rather than a formal presentation. So a lot of what I'm going to be sharing with you actually stems back to my experience working in Yale's Office of International Affairs. That's where I became familiar with the F visa, the J visas, the LMNOPs of immigration law. And so some of what I'm sharing with you isn't directly related to what I do on a day-to-day basis as an immigration attorney, because it's those international student offices and employers who are working together. And an immigration attorney doesn't necessarily play a role in many different aspects of an international student's route towards employment in the United States. But what I do think about each and every day as an immigration attorney are these 3 tracks to lawful permanent residency. For someone who is not born in the United States, they must obtain a lawful permanent resident card, a green card, before they can become a U.S. citizen. And these are the 3 tracks one can take in order to obtain permanent residency. Family-based immigration is available for individuals who have a U.S. citizen or permanent resident spouse, parent, sibling, or child who can petition them, sponsor them. And it is through that family relationship that a foreign-born individual can obtain lawful permanent residency. Why is lawful permanent residency so important? Well, it is that necessary step in order to then be eligible to apply for U.S. citizenship. Typically, one can apply for citizenship 5 years after becoming a permanent resident. And while permanent residents don't have all of the rights of U.S. citizens, they have legal status to live in the United States, they have legal status to work in the United States, and can generally travel freely in and out of U.S. borders. Another track is employment-based immigration law, and we will dive into that over the course of the next couple of hours through our various presentations. But that's similar to family-based immigration, but instead of having a family member doing the sponsoring or the petitioning, it's an employer. So there must be an employer-employee relationship for someone to be able to gain permanent residency through an employer. The third track is humanitarian relief, and this is for individuals who have generally experienced some sort of unfortunate circumstances in their lives. Asylum, for example, falls under humanitarian relief, which is for someone who has been persecuted in their home country. U visas are available for individuals, non-U.S. citizens, who have been a victim of a crime here in the United States. Special immigrant juvenile status, also part of this track, is for individuals under the age of 21 who are unmarried and have been neglected, abused, or abandoned by one or both of their parents. While this may not feel super relevant, there are college students who may be eligible for special immigrant juvenile status. The definition of neglect, abuse, and abandonment is the Minnesota state definition. And sometimes parental practices that are customary in one country may actually qualify as neglect, abuse, or abandonment by the state of Minnesota. And so there's a broad array of children under 21 who have recently became eligible for special immigrant juvenile status thanks to a Minnesota state law that went into effect, raising the age from 18 to 21 for who can qualify for what's called an at-risk juvenile guardianship. At-risk juvenile guardianship. That's a law that just went into effect on August 1st, making it possible for not just children under 18, but 18, 19, and 20-year-olds to qualify for special immigrant juvenile status, which leads to a pathway to permanent residency and U.S. citizenship. So I deviate a little bit, but I emphasize special immigrant juvenile status just because it's something new and it does benefit children who may be in that college age range. So here is a permanent resident card. This is what so many international students want. I'm not oblivious to the fact that many international students are in the United States to study and have goals and career plans in their home countries. But for individuals who do wish to stay in the United States, like this is the goal. And oftentimes, students are going to come to you, someone at a university or even a prospective employer and say, I have an F1 visa, I'm an international student, I would really like to be a lawful permanent resident, and I want to work for you, or I want to work in the United States. And instead of it being a direct pathway, it's often like this. It's complicated. And there are a few ways for students to kind of get their foot in the door so that it can lead to a more direct pathway to something a bit more permanent, if that is something that they continue to desire. The opportunities that often kind of allow international students to get their foot in the door is curricular practical training and optional practical training. So we're going to dive into these a little bit so that we gain a better understanding of those entry points for international students. So curricular practical training is an opportunity for an international student to gain internship experience at a place of employment if and only if that type of professional experience is required through their course of study. So some majors or programs require like clinicals or experiential learning, certain types of internships or on-the-job shadowing, and CPT can be a way for international students to get that experience without having to get a work permit. So CPT is something that does not take a lot of effort on an employer, but takes some coordination with the school and the student. This is one, if not the only way for college students to gain experience in the workplace without having to submit an application for employment authorization with the U.S. government. There is also no government fees for the employer, for the school, or for the student in order for them to engage in CPT. CPT can be part-time or full-time. Part-time is preferable probably for the student, because if it is full-time, the hours are going to, or the time that they're on CPT will be deducted from OPT, or employment opportunities in the future. You like all my acronyms so far? Okay, bear with me. So essentially, the student / the school would need to have communication with a prospective employer, and through kind of an offer letter, they could get it set up by showing proof that it is part of their course of study. A student could engage in CPT and get work authorization. So employers, if you are looking for interns, look no further than universities that have experiential learning as part of their required course of study. Additionally, pre-OPT is an option for students to have internship experiences or work experience while they are still in school or during their summer breaks.
Can I ask
Yes.
a question about the CPT?
Mm-hmm.
So on the CPT, can students be paid for the CPT? Can they get like money for working on an internship or like working on as CPT students? And if so, can they obtain with the CPT the Social Security number in order to be paid?
They will not obtain a Social Security number on CPT, and the question of payment probably will go back to the school on whether experiential learning that is paid would count towards what they need for their course of study. So typically, I don't think a student can get paid and earn credit at the same time. It's kind of double dipping, but does anyone? You can?
You can. The process we have at South Central College is when a student is approved for CPT, the job offer letter that they would receive from their OPT internship employer comes to my office as a DSO. I authorize CPT in CVIS and it goes on page 2 of the student's I-20. I then write a letter of support, and the student takes both letters of support along with the endorsed I-20 to Social Security Administration. They get a Social Security number, then they return to the school and complete the paperwork with members of the Financial Aid Office who are familiar with payroll forms that they need. Sorry, I'm thinking of on-campus employment, but yes, they still need a Social Security number to get paid. Additionally, if a student, I know I don't want to go off topic, but on-campus employment is a similar process. If their work study available for students who can be paid with institutional or departmental dollars because they're not federal aid or FAFSA eligible, they still need a Social Security number to receive pay in the United States. So they can receive pay, but I would give them a letter of support with an endorsed I-20 to take to Social Security Administration to receive that Social Security number so the employer can pay them.
And it really depends on the internship, because if it's a paid internship, then obviously we have to treat them as any other student, but if it's an unpaid, then they won't.
And from my years back in school, I remember that for the CPT, they had to write, like, you cannot be like a clerk in any business and take CPT. You have to have, like, on the description of your job, something related to your major or to your
Exactly,
course.
yeah.
It's curricular in nature, so actually there's it has to be required for the it's curricular, so it has to not only directly relate to the program of study, but it has to be integral to the program of study. So it can be an elective or a required internship.
Awesome. Well, I'm learning so much, so thank you so much for.
That's okay. It's my job day in, day out.
Well, I appreciate your expertise very much. So does anyone have any other questions about CPT? Okay. So pre-OPT would cover the same time period, but it would be for employment that is not integral to the course of study. And OPT, OPT, it's the same process to apply for OPT whether the student is still studying or the student has graduated. So when I say OPT, it encompasses pre-OPT. It does require a more formal application process and approval from the U.S. government for the individual to work in the United States. But again, the responsibility is primarily on the student to make sure that the application is submitted, that the fees are paid. There is a fee of $410. And the process is, when successful, is often facilitated by the International Student Office of the student's university. But it is not particularly onerous on the employer. So employers can engage in the employment of an international student on an internship or after graduation with OPT without having to make a financial investment in sponsoring that student.
I just wanted to add for employers as well, but with CPT, which happens prior to graduation, and pre-completion OPT, a student has to be in full academic status for 1 academic year before they can start CPT and before they can start OPT, so they have to be a student for a year prior to that, and they cannot work more than 20 hours a week when school's in session. When school's on summer and winter breaks, they can work more than that. But again, if they do full-time CPT, then we've got an OPT calculation tool. It gets deducted from the 365 days of post-completion OPT. Complex, but
Yes, and it can get complex quite quickly. But this is sort of the expertise lies in the international student offices of the universities where the student is enrolled. So these granular details are not particularly crucial for the employer to understand, because the student is going to be working with the International Student Office to obtain a work authorization card and a social security number, which is what the employer needs in order to hire the individual. So this is an example of an employment authorization card, and it's important for employers to understand that unless an individual is a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident, they must have an employment authorization document like this one in order to legally work in the United States. The exception is CPT. They also need the social security number. So together, these are the 2 documents that an international student would need to present in order for the employer and the student to fill out the I-9. Post-optional practical training, OPT, is an opportunity for students who want to work in the United States after graduation. And OPT is, the application process is the same, whether it's for pre-OPT or more commonly the OPT after graduation. OPT has a duration of 12 months, generally. And the OPT does not begin until the student or the graduate receives their employment authorization card. The government moves quite slowly, and it takes months for the application to be processed by the federal government and for that employment authorization card to be mailed to the student or the graduate. And so it's important that the International Student Office and the students are thinking proactively about what opportunities the student wants to pursue. One can apply for OPT without having an employer offer letter. So if an international student knows that they want to remain in the United States after graduation, they should be applying for OPT several months before they graduate. That way, they will not fall out of status and their F1 student visa can roll into OPT, and they maintain lawful status. That's the smooth scenario that we all hope for, but it does require proactivity on parts of the, primarily the student and the school supporting the student. So we've talked a little bit about like the calculations and how much time one can be on OPT. The general rule is 12 months. If a student has engaged in pre-OPT, that amount of time will be subtracted from the 12-month duration. There is an extension available for people who have a STEM degree, who majored in STEM, and that extension can be for an additional 24 months, so OPT can be for a total of 36 months for a student who has a STEM degree. So employers out there who employ individuals in the STEM field, just think about how an international student could join your ranks for up to 3 years without you having to make any financial investment in their immigration status. There are some expectations of employers who hire individuals with that STEM extension, so that additional 24 months. The government will be looking to see that you have provided adequate training avenues and opportunities for growth within their employment and that field, just to ensure that the individual is really utilizing that degree that they earned and that there is still that relevant fit for an international student to be working in the United States, implementing what they learned in that STEM degree. Eligible STEM majors. Now, STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, and you may think, well, these days so much falls into STEM, and it's true, but the Department of Homeland Security defines which majors are STEM eligible majors for the OPT extension. And there's too many to put on a slide, so there's a printout in front of you of all of the majors that are considered STEM majors. The link is also here to see that digitally. In January, they added a couple dozen new majors that are classified as STEM majors. So if you have been going off of an old list, 2021 or earlier, you'll want to make sure that these new majors are part of your consideration when advising students. So before we dive into any more alphabet soup, I thought let's do a few examples and see if anything is sinking in here. Menchem is an international undergraduate student studying in the US on an F1 visa. He's majoring in accounting. Menchem works on campus at his university library during college. After college, he hopes to work at an accounting firm. What status is he eligible for, and for how long? Does any brave souls want to take a gander? Yeah.
I don't think it falls, I can't see it here on the list, I don't think it falls under STEM, so it would just be 12 months of OPT.
Okay.
STEM degrees are, to my knowledge, everything I know with my job is it would only be to students at the bachelor's degree level, so we don't deal with the STEM extensions for OPT at South Central College because they're all 2-year degrees.
Okay.
My interpretation of that would be somebody doing their 12 months post-completion OPT minus any days that is student. See, he worked on campus, so therefore that's on-campus employment, so that's not going to be taken away from the 12 months. So I would say 12 months OPT.
Okay, 12 months OPT. You're right. And I give this example because it's important to note that first, On-campus employment does not require CPT or OPT, so therefore it does not get subtracted from OPT. And accounting, as much as you think it would be a math major, it is considered a business major and is not an eligible major for the STEM extension of OPT. I'm surprised too. So it is kind of interesting, and it's why you really have to keep that STEM list handy to figure out what majors are in fact eligible for that 24-month extension, because it's not particularly intuitive.
So I have got some on the business area. They have added that on the STEM, but they have whatever it is, business statistics, business analytics are inside now on the list of the STEM. Whatever it has to do with calculations and data analytics or big data, it is inside. Like, so they have business and management inside the STEM area. We just have to find like how it fits. Like, and also they are looking to the curriculum. If inside the curriculum there are those courses when somebody's graduating.
Yeah, there are arguments that can be made, and the more advanced the degree level, so if it's a master's or PhD, the more likely that it can be argued to fit into one of those STEM majors. Here's another example. Evelyn is an international undergrad studying in the U.S. on an F1 visa. She's majoring in climate science. During summer break, Evelyn had a full-time 3-month internship at the EPA in Washington, D.C. She used pre-OPT to legally work in the United States. The EPA offered her a full-time job after college if she can obtain work authorization. What status is she eligible for, and how long? And then is there any sort of conversation that she should be having with her employer, prospective employer at the EPA?
She can do STEM because of her sciences.
Yep, so climate science is an eligible STEM major. So how much time could she have for OPT potentially? 33 months. So it would be 36. Well, so start at 12. 12 is the standard. She had a summer internship for 3 months, so she would lose that and be down to 9 months. After 9 months, if she had applied for an OPT extension, she would get another 24 months for a total of 33 months. Make sense?
With that, Erin, so if a student works part-time, if they work a day, that ticks off in a day. But if they work 4 hours of that day, is that not half of a working day per se? Or how does that calculation unfold?
So I think it's deducted in either part-time or full-time increments. Is that right?
Yeah, so what I have is I'm trying to think, so I think it's USCIS, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. I may have got it from studying the States. So there's an OPT calculation tool, and it's a spreadsheet with inbuilt formulas. So if you have a student that did X number of days of part-time pre-completion OPT or even CPT, you can use this calculator and it will tell you exactly how many days that student is eligible for post-completion OPT once that has been taken off, because obviously full-time CPT does affect post-completion OPT, but part-time CPT doesn't. So it's like an Excel worksheet with formulas built in. So you just literally type dates and whether it's pre or post, and it does the math for you.
Gotcha.
What kind of dialogue should Evelyn be having with her prospective employer? Yeah.
About sponsorship in the future.
Mm-hmm. So yes, Evelyn, I think can be transparent with the EPA about how, she has up to 33 months where she could work for them. She's, proven herself as a stellar intern. They've extended an offer for her to return. And while the EPA is eager to hire her, it's a good time for Evelyn to make the pitch for sponsorship. Say, yes, I would love to join the EPA, but I can only join you for 33 months unless we, at some point down the road, submit an application for a work visa or employment-based immigrant visa. So start that conversation with employers early, be transparent about it, and demonstrate why the employer should want to keep you on. So, I think international students are in a sometimes challenging position where they really need to advocate for themselves more than American citizens may. So they're, encouraging those international students to really advocate for themselves, I think, is critical to their success in, employment in the U.S. All right. So next I want to dive into more of those longer-term employment opportunities. But up until this point, employers, there are opportunities to hire international students, to test the waters, to have internships, all without having to make a financial investment or have any contact with the federal government. So, employers, the CPT and OPT really, really can be a good opportunity to work with international students and graduates and not have to deal with any headaches of the federal government or additional paperwork or fees. So I just want to make that clear. And it's also evident that here in this room, we have a lot of expertise at universities and colleges where there are people who can help facilitate this process. So it's, I say all of this really to demonstrate that it's not scary to hire an international student or graduate, and there's a lot of potential for long-term employment opportunities as well. One common option for longer-term employment would be an H-1B. An H-1B is a temporary work visa for 3 years, which can be renewed one time for a total of 6 years. H-1Bs, importantly, are employer-specific, position-specific, and location-specific. So details. There must be an employer-employee relationship. So unlike when a student applies for OPT and may or may not have a hire letter, an H-1B must be initiated by an employer who wants to hire a specific employee. The employer is responsible for covering the legal fees and processing fees for the H-1 visa and agree to pay the prevailing wage determination, or the prevailing wage that is determined by the Department of Labor. Yes?
Another question. So do they have to do a national search for that position before they hire somebody that's international? Because in my knowledge in the past, they had to have an open position that they are going to advertise in a national search, and then they could hire if that candidate that's international has the highest qualification or some specific qualification that they want. Is that what applies?
The process that you've just described is for employment-based immigrant visas. So it is not necessary for employers to conduct a nationwide search for qualified U.S. workers for the H-1B. Okay. The H-1B, the downfall to the H-1B is that there is a cap to the number of H-1B visas the government will issue each year. Exceptions to the cap are for employers who are nonprofits, government research agencies, or universities, and some public school districts who have relationships with a college or university. When I say university, I say like higher education institution, college and university. So H-1Bs are fantastic for employers who are exempt from the cap, but really not great for small employers who would be subject to the cap. And I say that because this cap of like 60 or 80,000 visas a year those visas get swallowed up by really, really big companies. Companies that will apply for like 1,000 H-1Bs and may get 500. Well, it's a lot different when a small employer wants one and doesn't get it in that lottery. So I tend to have conversations about H-1Bs primarily with school districts and universities who want to hire international students and graduates, and some government entities. But in greater Minnesota, I see H-1Bs playing an important role in our teacher shortages, our university administrator shortages, and things like that, for employers who don't have to deal with that nasty cap. Okay. Longer-term employment options are employment-based immigrant visas, so straight away going for the green card, that permanent residence card. And let me just go back to the H-1Bs. I don't know that I was necessarily clear on nonprofit organizations also being exempt from the cap. I'm looking at Alejandra, and so like nonprofits also can be exempt from the cap. So it's not just universities who are classified as nonprofits, but community organizations and so on as well.
C3, C6, all nonprofits.
I think C3 primarily, but I don't know about C6s. I'd have to look into that. Yes.
I just wanted to add, although we don't deal with the H-1B at our school, we've obviously looked into it and researched it, because some students go on to be employed by an employer who will sponsor them for the H-1B, but a prerequisite is that the student has to have a bachelor's degree at minimum. But although we do 2-year degrees, we have students who obtained a bachelor's degree in their home country, and the bachelor's degree does not have to have been earned in the United States. So if a student goes through a 2-year school, earns an associate of science degree in registered nursing, but already has a bachelor's degree from Kenya, then that student is eligible for the H-1B, because about 90% of our students at SEC are nursing students, and many of whom have bachelor's degrees already.
Okay.
So I just wanted to add that for any employers or anybody else that may
Yes.
help to know that.
And there's like a reciprocity table where you can look at what kind of education obtained in a certain country is equivalent or would count to being a bachelor's degree in the United States. We're going to have to speed things up real quick.
Can you tell us where to find the reciprocity table?
It would, I feel like it would be on the Department of State website, but
For H-1B, that would be United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS.
USCIS.
Department of State is for visas, like for people coming into the US, so it would be USCIS.
Okay. Yeah.
Would we be able to pick up the long term after Promi speaks? He's on a tight timeline.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, employment-based immigrant visas are just like, and I can wrap this up in probably 30 seconds, actually. So employment-based visas are would be an employer making the commitment to sponsoring an individual for a green card. And oftentimes it turns out to be not much more expensive or time intensive as an H-1B. So it ends up being sometimes a better option than one would think. and not be super, super intimidating. Typically for H-1Bs and EB visas, the employer does work with an immigration law firm to handle the process for them, so you don't have to deal with the technicalities of it. But I mentioned EB2s and EB3s because those are for individuals who have bachelor's degrees or master's degrees or like terminal degrees. So I just highlight those two as pathways for employers to work with international students on a long-term to permanent basis. And while it may feel intimidating, just know that it's available, and oftentimes just the most direct pathway without having to constantly reevaluate an employee's immigration status. The employees who have family members also can gain legal status as derivatives to their applications. So, we've had some good discussions. Thank you so much for your attention and for all of the input. I've appreciated this conversation. And once again, thank you for having me.
All right. Promeet, originally from India, got one of his 4 master's degrees with an MBA in marketing at a top business school in India. After working for an advertising agency in Bombay for 3 years, he then moved to the US to receive his MBA in finance from the James Madison University in Virginia. He then bounced around in a few different careers, and one of which helping Dell start their first sales center outside of the US, and then joining IBM where he led a procurement team in India. He then took an academic leave of absence in 2010 and then earned another degree from Eastern Mennonite University in Virginia. He then decided to move into academics full-time. He pursued his PhD in educational leadership from the Minnesota State University in Mankato with a keen interest in leadership, conflict resolution, ethics, community engagement. And he currently teaches business at the business department at St. Paul College in St. Paul, Minnesota. We've had a great opportunity getting to know Promeet over the last few weeks and months. We're really excited to hear him and hear his story.
JC helped me so much when I was an international student at MSU Mankato. It's nice to see an entire row of people from MSU Mankato. I feel very much at home. Thanks, Sam and Garrett, for inviting me over. I didn't think that I needed to make slides after watching what Erin said, because one thing she said is, it's complicated. And if there's anything that sums it up well enough, it's that. Has anybody in this group, been to India? No? Okay. I think the jokes about traffic in India should sum it up. It's complicated, but somehow it works. Okay? And believe it or not, that's exactly what the H-1B system is here, or the student visa system. It is all very, very complicated. Somehow it works. So I've learned over the years, it's important to have a sense of humor. It's important to be patient. And it's very, very important to be comfortable with not knowing what's going on. Okay? So just like what Erin said, please stop me at any time. This was my role when I was employed by IBM in India. The position of global market intelligence, there was one person in the whole of the IBM community of 250,000 people. It was a competitive process, and they hired me. Okay, so I was very blessed, I was very privileged to be in this role. And it was after I had only 2 MBAs at that time, just 2. So in this role, I worked with IBM in Thailand, I worked with IBM in Vietnam. We wanted to start an office in Vietnam. And one of my colleagues said, we need some backup. Can you come over for a few months, get to know the team, and then start hiring talent locally? I said, sure. All I had to do was give IBM Travel Services my passport, and I got a work visa for, this was Vietnam. Later on, I had to do some work in Thailand. Same thing. Give them the passport, You get the work visa, it's over and done with. I thought, wow, this is going really well. I'm going to do the same with the US. And that's when things slow down a little bit, because it's not as easy as it might look. And all of us who've worked in academics and who've processed visas, we know this. It is really an interesting process, but it works. Okay? I worked here for almost 10 years at IBM before taking academic leave of absence. I think that the work visa is complicated, but it is worth it, not only because it's good for the company, but it's actually good for all of us. And I won't get too much into this. I want to move on into something more interesting. But briefly, there's research that shows that international workers benefit not just the origin country, but not just the destination country, but the origin country as well. Okay? We live in a system. We live in a system where all of us are connected to each other. We're not independent, and the relationships that we develop benefit all of us. So I think that there's huge benefit in having people from different skills, different work environments, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, it just gets a little bit tedious to do that, but we will get to that. Erin talked about the H-1B visa program. It's a great program. I'm on an H-1B visa right now. And I reached the end of my first 3-year installment, and I'm still waiting for my extension. Okay, I'm waiting for it right now. Fortunately, I can still work. Okay, what's interesting is, and I thought, what perspective can I offer to all of you? I think this event that we're having right now is so helpful. It is important to network. It's important to be empathetic. It's important to understand what people are going through. When I first started working at St. Paul College, I was offered this job, but I didn't have the work authorization. My work authorization was tied into the F1 visa that I had, which when I transferred over to OPT, that was why and how I was in the country. My license is tied to my OPT, my license is tied to my H-1B. It's a very complicated thing. When I moved from OPT to the H-1B, in the interim period, there was a time when I didn't have a license. So for 1 month, I was at home, right here in Mankato. I love Mankato for many reasons. This is one of them. My friends supported me a whole lot. Okay? I had a lot of local support. I had a lot of university support. My university colleagues were extremely helpful. They're very understanding. Okay? But it was kind of curious to think that after all the interesting things that I'd done, after the promise of what I could do, I was grounded for a month because I was waiting for something to get processed. And I don't think that this is, I'm not complaining. All I'm saying is it's complicated. And I think one of the important things for all of us to understand is that the dignity of labor is still very, very important, regardless of your authorization status. And my university community understood that very, very well. Once again, MSU Mankato, great place. In the workplace, I've seen that that sometimes did not happen. And without taking any names, there have been organizations that I've worked for. There have been HR, no departments either. There have been people that I've worked for who've just not understood that there are certain challenges which are just impossible for me to cover on my own. You know, so I think what I said before, a little bit of empathy, a little bit of understanding that, you know, some of us have a few challenges which are different from others, so try and understand the other person a little bit better. If you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer that. I'll take a quick pause. Anything at all that strikes a note, anything that you'd like to know more about?
What does it look like for the empathy that you mentioned? What does it look like in a company that's providing the empathy that you're talking about versus one?
Such a good question. Such a good question. So, for example, I have this on one of my slides later on, but it's so much easier to just talk through it. A lot of the employees that I hired here when I was working in the Washington, D.C. metro area in the year 2000, because they were waiting for their papers to come through, they could not leave the country. For any family circumstance, for any family emergency, they simply could not leave. So at least extend that kind of emotional support in whatever way. Every single person is different. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So to at least understand that is very helpful. I mean, I've known people who've experienced losses in their family, but they didn't go back simply because, am I going to be allowed back into the U.S. was the primary concern. So for me, the problem was I could not drive. I lost my license for a month. That's nothing compared to not wanting to leave the country because you don't know if you can come back. Okay, so I think the challenge lies with all of us wanting to be at the workplace and having a level playing field. Sometimes it's not entirely possible because there might be something weighing on, I'll use myself as an example, something weighing on my mind that's preventing me from doing the best job that I possibly can. Thanks for that question, very good one. We've talked about that, the challenge. The other thing is not knowing when you can possibly start working. When I got the job at St. Paul College, they use something called premium processing. You pay a little bit extra and you get your H-1B visa application pushed to the front of the line. And it's almost $1,000 extra. $2,500. Oh, really? Wow. See, rules change all the time. So it is worth it, given the circumstances, but all of this adds to the cost of bringing somebody on board. You've got to ask yourself at the end of the day, it's not just a dollar amount, what are the tangible and the intangible benefits from hiring person A, B, or C? Okay, what else do I have? So much uncertainty. Yes, it is very, very important to find out how to do that. I think networking is very important. I was joking with Sam that I'm kind of a part-time attorney because over the time that I've spent here trying to understand the system, I've learned so many things that I'm actually, in medical terms, my eldest brother, who's a doctor at the Mankato Clinic, he said, everybody self-medicates with Google. And that's exactly what I was doing for my own work situation. Not recommended in medicine or in immigration, but we have to do it. We have to do it, and we rely on networks more than you can ever imagine. It's very, very important. This is so helpful. When I was a student, I wish I'd networked more. But to go back to what I said, there's so much stress. You're approaching a deadline. You know that you're going to graduate. You know that you might need a job. You might need somebody to come up with a sponsorship offer. Is that going to happen? Does that weigh you down, and does that prevent you from going to a networking event that could potentially help you a lot? So that there's so many things that students have to make hard choices with. It's not always possible to connect all the dots. Yes.
Who is your point of contact? So the alternative to Googling.
Yeah.
Do you have your straight line of communication with someone in an HR department? Do you speak directly to an attorney? who answers your questions and gives you information about the status of your visa or the transition of things?
Such a good question. So at the time that I finished my fourth master's degree in Virginia, I wasn't sure of what to do. And again, I thought, there's a lot at stake. I'd quit my job at IBM, and I thought the only thing I can do is to contact an attorney, which I did. It was helpful, but it didn't change anything because I already knew that I was going to do a doctoral degree. And a confession to the group, I did one master's degree just to stay on in the US. Okay? So, and I told that to my doctoral advisor. He said, oh, shame on you. He said, actually, that's a good thing, but the reason I did that is in the interim period while I was applying for doctoral programs, it's a tedious process, and I thought I can bide my time productively by continuing to study. So it really takes a lot of patience. I'm surprised that I survived. But it was very helpful to have the kind of support, like I said, from the academic community. Yes, please.
So to make you feel better, I did an MBA for the same reason.
Uh-huh.
Just to stay in the US and have like employment.
Okay, good.
So it is a very common situation for people that are international, that they stay in school and they do more and they're overeducated because they have to stay in the system, especially when the system doesn't work very well and you wait to get like a visa or something to be approved, and in the between you have that time that you have to keep going.
Right. Right. Thank you. Thank you for that confession.
One more thing is that earlier Erin said about the cost for a student to apply for the OPT. It is $430 or $420, I think.
410.
So think about students. I had students from Nepal or some other countries that 420, it's a lot of money for many students. So if you are employing students that are international, consider how much money they have spent, and the university have to consider about maybe kind of like a grant or something for international students that they want to stay and have like an OPT here. Because I had students that they didn't go for graduation because the gown costed like $80 for them. And they're like, that's a lot of money for us to spend. So $400-something, it's a lot of money for the average international student, depending from what country they're coming. So I wanted to all think about that perspective, because applying for an OPT and not getting it and having to apply again, that can be like a really big amount of money. Sorry again.
No, that's wonderful. That's a very good tip. Thank you. The insight. And on that note, another insight. One of my colleagues in the doctoral program at MSU Mankato, he's from South Dakota, and he was complaining to me that he'd sent out 3 resumes to universities and he didn't get a single response. And we were very close friends. And I said, perspective matters. I said, you've sent out 3 resumes, you're a little bit upset that nobody has contacted you. In the past month alone, I've sent out about 25 and nobody's responded. On the topic of rules changing and the costs of applications changing, the political, social, and economic climate also changes. It's a pattern, it's an ebb and flow. So I was applying for a job at a time when it was not very, how should I put this politely? It was not conducive for international students to be in the job market. So I think my hit rate was probably 1 in 100, something like that. And I did apply to about 250 to 270 places, and I did get that break. So it is important to keep at it. Really important to do that. Yeah. Another interesting thing, I talked about systems. I mean, every single one of us has an important role to play. When I'm hired, I create other opportunities for other people. Very often, people who are American citizens. And that's important to understand and recognize the interconnectedness of all our jobs, of all the opportunities that emerge from one person being employed. It's not only about me, it's about other opportunities that emerge that you might not have even imagined. Okay? And there is, in fact, research to show this. And in industries that rely a lot on people with H-1B visas or international work experience, the cycles of unemployment are less than in the industries that do not rely on diverse talent. I thought you'd be interested to see that insight. Any questions, any comments? Yes?
A question, Promi. So for the businesses that are, struggling to find people to work for them and have not went into the realm of looking at international students, how should they approach an individual like yourself in those shoes, up against a deadline, up against stress?
Right, right.
And how does an employer find that person that actually fits if they're not networking and they're not
Such a good question, Sam. So the whole networking thing is very important. When I was looking for a job, it's a numbers game. I know that more applications are better. I also look at the number of employers who sponsor the maximum number of visas. And I see an IBM, which is, again, what Erin mentioned. I see IBM, I see Cognizant, I see Accenture, and I gravitate towards employers like that, and I might not see a smaller employer that does not show up on the radar, because I don't even know that that they're looking for people like me. So to keep yourself visible, it helps to connect with the academic community. Even if you have not hired an international person before, and truthfully, I'm not sure that my current employer, St. Paul College, hired many people before on an H-1B visa. They took a chance on me. And I'm so glad that they did. I'm very happy doing what I do. Yeah, yes?
Well, and just to kind of connect the dots, so St. Paul College would be a cap exempt from the H-1B.
A nonprofit, yes.
So they would not have to enter the lottery for an H-1B visa. But one piece of advice that I give employers considering hiring international workers is to incorporate international workforce in your long-term hiring plan, your long-term strategy. International, the immigration system is not created in a way for you to quickly fill a position with a foreign worker. Instead, you need to just have a vision for, if you want to grow your company over the next 3 years or 5 years, think about how foreign workers can be part of that strategy so you can plan ahead. It's not a nimble system that can fill immediate problems very easily.
For example, when I was an international student and I was going to do my OPT, I was applying to different positions, but many employers didn't know about sponsorship. They had no idea, the HR had no idea what's a sponsorship of visa. So I would go through all the interviews, they would say that they are going to hire me, and then when I tell them, okay, but I told you that I need sponsorship, and they said, we're going to send their papers to the HR, and they will take care of this. And then I would get the reply, we don't do sponsor visas. So employers need to learn, if they want to have international students, they have to know the process, they have to have HR that knows the process. And also when they advertise positions there, you have to be careful how you frame the position, because if your history said that you had that sentence under your position that we don't offer sponsorship, I would find that if I'm looking for a position. I'm not going to apply in your job. So you have to have that we do offer sponsorship for the eligible whatever. So you have to change your HR thinking and how you advertise positions, or the culture of the company has to change in order to attract people.
Thank you for that. I'd like to add to what you just said. So it is true that this makes it complicated. There are laws in the US that prevent us from asking somebody, Are you authorized to work in the US? So prospective employers politely find a way around that, and they say, will you now or in future require sponsorship to work in the US? And I believe that at the time that I was applying for jobs some years ago, that put checking that box put my resume at the bottom of the stack. I believe that's what happened. But that's okay. It's important to just keep at it. Yes?
And just to go off of that, we've had some meetings really over these past months with some prospective employers like local workforce organisations. And I think if international student officers at colleges and universities are able to try to network with and connect with international student officers as a way to kind of whether those organisations, want to meet with international student officers or they want to come to present to talk about their organisation and gaps in the workforce and the type of employees they need. We're going to have some meetings with like Mayo Clinic Health System, Mankato, some of the long-term care facilities locally and regionally, because we do have a lot of international students go through, the nursing program, and so it is important to maybe reach out to education institutions or, organisations such as, Region 9 and others where you can find ways to connect with education institutions and a way to find out your student population, the types of opportunities that students are looking for, and the types of gaps that you have, and then that could be, a starting point to have those conversations.
Right.
I would say that's the foundation of today's event.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how do we bridge that gap?
Yeah.
How do we bring together industry and higher ed to the table to network with students, to showcase those opportunities, both regionally and essentially to support their career wherever it may be in the U.S.
And on that point, just to connect all the dots, Sam, you're asking how do employers find students who are international students. JC, I know that you won't remember me necessarily, but because you have so many international students. But I'll say this, that every time I needed a new I-20, our MSU Mankato International Student Office was so responsive. And it's not that they were not responsive to other students, but it's just that they knew that for an international student to be out of immigration status, it's a non-negotiable. And once that happens, you could potentially lose your visa, you could potentially be sent back. So I appreciate that about all the academic institutions I've worked for. It'll take some time for the workforce to understand those deadlines as well, and those hard stops. Yes, please.
With the way that the workforce is struggling right now anyway, I guess I would just encourage some of the higher eds to, when you talk about that you're meeting with Mankato, there's a lot of outlying communities that are also in the same situation that really need help. And we're far enough away from the local institutions that this conversation is just not at the forefront of our communities. However, it needs to be. So I would just encourage, when you're having those meetings, to think, an hour outside of Mankato. Because the opportunities there are huge. Our employers just don't know about them.
And so we are utilising the expertise of Region 9, and that's something that's going to be happening with us over the next few months to find out more regionally rather than just locally how we can help the workforce to be able to fill some of those gaps, because obviously there's a worker shortage, but also at the same time provide opportunities for our international students for CPT and OPT. Regularly we have F1 international students driving to South Central College in North Mankato or Faribault from like between cities or an hour away. And they're up at 4 a.m. driving to clinical sites, and they're really dedicated, right? I feel really passionate, and I will advocate for my students. They're so passionate about their education. They're really conscientious. They're up early. They're driving to clinical sites. They will drive, an hour away for a CPT or an OPT opportunity. So we're going to try to utilize the expertise of others to help us connect with those employees and find out who's looking for students. And that's
We're
one-
looking for students. We'll take
Fantastic. Very nice. On the topic of deadlines, I'd like to leave now because I have to drive back to St. Paul and teach a class.
Okay.
So thanks. I really enjoyed this interaction. If you do have any questions, Garrett and Sam have my email ID. I'd be happy to talk to you at any time. Thank you.
But we're talking about the importance of that network, bringing industry together with higher ed, working with the services available. But it's really about developing that network. MSU, the international students represent 10% of their class, of their student population. In the fall of 2022, the university enrolled over 1,400 international students. J.C. Fry is the director of the Kearney International Center at MSU, where she leads a team of 10 full-time staff and over 20 students who are responsible for the recruitment and retention of international students. And that team provides the comprehensive services, including cultural adjustment, immigration advising, employment, internship guidance, and community involvement. So J.C.'s going to talk more about what it's like at the higher ed level and some of the gaps and the opportunities and how we can all come together to lift the tide to rise all boats. So please help me welcome J.C.
So official. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, do you have the clicker? Thanks. So I am not a teacher or a faculty member like ProMeet was, so my slides will not be nearly as cool, but I hope our conversation is as exciting. My colleagues from the Career Development Center were not able to join us today, so I said I would moonlight for them, so wish me well. They're understaffed, just like my office is, and so it's kind of takes a village these days. But if you aren't in the Career Development Center's website yet as an employer with a login for Handshake, I really encourage you to get into that website and set up an account for your organization if you want to start recruiting and advertising to college-age students and including international students. This is the platform where all students, once they register their first semester, get a login, and they can go in and search for jobs. And it's pretty comprehensive. They can search for internships, they can search by location, they can search by like degree, like what their major is. International students are becoming more savvy where they know they can't look for work study, but they can look for hourly paid work. It's just a really great resource for you, and that's a great place for you to list your internships. I would take a picture of this too. They have some upcoming fairs. They have book out the ballroom many times during the year. Sometimes they're career focused, like different fields of study. Sometimes they're just wide ranged. We're doing excuse me, I didn't make these slides. We're doing a fair October 17th and 18th, I think. Erin, you're going to be there too? Yeah, so a big fair. And this year we're going to have two tables, one where Erin will be available to employers who have questions about hiring international students. And I'll be there, and someone from my office, to be available to students if they have questions about navigating that next step, internship or post-degree. So this is another website on their page where it's a guide to hiring international students. There's a document on my website as well, and I'll leave my business card so you can contact me if you have specific questions about any of this. And Erin, you made the slide too. So yeah, this is the expo that we'll be having in a couple weeks. And if you haven't realized, she's a great resource. And I just got to know her this year working with Alejandra and Region 9 on this task force where we're hoping to bring more opportunities to the community and to international students. If you have questions specific about career services that isn't related to international students or whatever, you can always email them. They will get back to you. But I'm excited to talk more about international students because that's what I am more comfortable with and what I know. So we have just over 1,400 students from over 95 countries. It's a pretty big population. And They come in with a wide variety of experience. Some of them have never had a job. Some of them have left a career to come to the U.S. to get a degree. And so we work with students we hire students in my office who've never had a job. That's interesting, to teach them just basic office environment and office tasks. Most of our programs on campus do allow or require an internship, and we talk about that with our students right away from the beginning, because if it's part of the conversation and if it's part of their overall plan from semester 1, they can build that in and maximize it. These are some of the programs that just recently, I'm an immigration advisor now since we're so understaffed, and these are some of the internships in these programs that I've recently helped students get approved for. So accounting, agribusiness, agricultural science, communications, you name it. We can pretty much every program has an internship opportunity. And Aaron, I think you covered this. I came in a little late, but CPT, that's what it is, right? So they have to have a job offer, has to be related to their degree, has to identify start and end dates, what are they gonna do? There's no application fee. My office will process it, and as long as they're registered for a course and they have the support of their academic department, we can help them get that authorization for that semester. During the school year, it's part-time, so 20 hours a week or less, and then during winter break or summers, it can be for more than 21 hours, more than 20 hours. Optional practical training. This is, I know that I heard you talk about pre-completion OPT. That doesn't happen very often in our school because we have so many internships in CPT, but that is an option. We work mostly with students who are applying for OPT towards the end of their academic program. And we do lots of trainings on that, and we start talking about it probably about 120 days before they can actually apply. It has to be within the program that they've just completed. So Aaron had talked about some STEM approved majors too. The SIP codes, I'm trying to think about some of the conversations we had. The universities and the academic departments determine what the SIP code is, and that's what anchors that program into that STEM or the associated SIP code. And so that's a conversation I'm trying to have with some academic departments in our college, in our colleges, because I want them to, if you're going to do a curriculum change, think about the curriculum that you have. How can you take a look at these lists of STEM-approved majors, and what can you do to the curriculum or your program to plop it into a STEM-approved SIP code? In our business school especially, there's a few different programs that I feel like they look like they could be in that program, but their SIP code is not matching, and that's really hard to tell a student. Sorry, I know that you feel like that business statistics major matches what it says on this list, but on the back end that SIP code does not match, and I can't help you get approved for that. So it's a lot about conversations and educating. Another STEM issue is in order for a student to apply for an OPT STEM extension, the employer has to be e-verified. I went round and round with an employer a week and a half ago because they just didn't want to do it. They just didn't want to sign up for e-verify, and they didn't want the government that closely involved. And I said, all you're doing is just re-verifying the I-9 documents that you already looked at. And I said, if you're not willing to do this, and you're going to lose this great employee, and he'll find work elsewhere. And they, well, I'll talk to my HR department. And I said, well, I'll talk to him. So I called them and I said, can you get on the internet, like pull up a website, I'm gonna email you a link. I emailed them the link and I helped them walk through the process. I'm like, it's not scary. What you're doing is making yourself open to way more talent and having more successful, business down the road because you're willing to hire a bigger, diverse pool. So it's about conversations and just making it not scary. We say demystifying the hiring of an international student all the time in my office. Yeah?
Would universities ever consider hosting a class then or a workshop for businesses interested in doing that?
Sure.
So that they would, I mean, if I go to my businesses, then it's very second-hand and I'm not the expert. But to me, it seems like that would be a natural.
Yeah. I mean, Yes, to a point. Like when students start talking about they're in the late stages of OPT getting ready for STEM and they start talking about H-1B, I'm like, hold up. my team advises just up to the F, and anything beyond that, like we're not equipped for that. But I would be very willing to talk to employers about why they should be E-verified to help with STEM applications. Alejandra, I think this would be a great idea for the task force to explore. We have a running list of goals, and this would be a really great one, I think.
I think Chambers of Commerce can play an important role in organizing those kinds of events. And like businesses too.
And I tell students, they hear about H-1Bs. It's like the big dream of coming to the U.S. and getting a worker visa. But I'm like, use all of your OPT, use it, because that's where you get choice. You get to figure out where you want to live in the U.S. You get to try different parts of the work, of the degree that you got. And try that all out, exhaust it, because that's maximizing your employment time in the U.S. too. But Garrett was talking about, how do we get the industry and the academic fields connected, and how do we get them at the same table? I really think one key tool would be getting to know someone in an academic department, like finding a champion that is teaching in the field in which your business is in and making those connections. Students come to our office and they'll say, I'm looking for an internship in marketing for whatever. I'm like, I can help you with the work authorization. I don't have the connections. It's the academic departments, it's the faculty. They're the ones that can make that connection for the student into the industry, into the employers. And so I'm happy to make those connections and make introductions. I know a lot of faculty and I know a lot of different departments, but that's not my area of expertise. So I'm happy to be a connector for sure. That was short. Yeah. So I guess I'm open. I'm ready for a conversation, questions. I think what I've noticed, and I've been doing this for many years, like 17 or 18 years, and I think that something that's never changed is the notion that it's just too much work to hire an international student. And there's absolutely no extra work to do an internship using CPT authorization or OPT. The work isn't really on the employer at that point. When you get to the STEM part, those additional 24 months, because OPT is considered still an F1 student benefit, they're a student. And the idea is that they're still growing and learning in the field in which they got that degree. So there is some check-in points and there is a training plan. But you already are meeting with your staff and you are already, setting goals and reflecting and reviewing. And so I don't think it would be that much extra work for an employer as well. I think it's just maybe a different document that you fill out or file or process. And so MSU has a ton of talent, and I have students who speak 4 or 5 languages, and they come in with, expertise and experiences that you can't even fathom, and they can just really contribute to your workforce, I think. Yeah, any questions, comments, ideas? Yeah?
Do you have any grants that you give to students through MSU for
Yes.
private fees?
Yes, I remember that comment. Thank you for bringing that back up. We don't right now. Right before COVID hit, we got a $20,000 donation or grant towards our foundation account. And during COVID, we exhausted those funds for application fees. And we paid for severe economic hardship application, which is the same price, $410, as well as OPT application fees. I'm hopeful that there's another wealthy alum who wants to dump another 20 grand in that account, because that was a game changer for so many students. Yeah.
Is that something that industry could pay? Like if they're working, if a student is interested with them and then they want to continue that employment, is that something that could be worked out so that maybe industry could pay for it if they're wanting to hire that student?
I don't think there are any rules around who makes the payment. There's a credit card form they can fill out. They can send a money order. It can be paid in multiple ways. I don't think I would be involved in that negotiation, but if that were something that was between the employee and the employer, maybe. Yeah.
I just have a comment, and I own when
Thank you for saying that.
interviewing someone is I have a job for you. So that's not what I'm doing. But I think that employers do not know that this is an easy thing. Maybe it's just different paperwork. It's not extra paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that there's messaging that needs to be either changed or made available. I don't know how that happens, but every industry and every employer needs workers.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's access to workers now, that doesn't really mean that like the HR people have changed or the hiring departments have changed. And they're doing things the way they've always done things. They might be trying things new, but they have all the same tools in their toolkit.
Mm-hmm.
So they aren't going to suddenly know that, what they've known is what they've always known. And so
Sure.
if they've always thought that it's been difficult to hire, international students, they're not going to think now it's suddenly easy.
Right.
And so I think that if, as communities or louder voices or universities or whoever, whatever in partnership or teamwork that can look like,
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that our employers and industries know that these workers are available
Yeah.
to fill gaps, and it's not hard. That's something that we really need to do for our region right now.
I agree.
But I'm not telling you you have to.
You can tell Alejandra. No, I'm just kidding. This is exactly like some of the, the bucket lists that we're creating for Region 9. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, as a community, we want that information. We don't always have access to it, so you're not gonna have any problem getting it out once it's available.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I think that's why we don't see many employers as we were hoping here today, is because there has been that. But that's what this whole global workforce opportunities event is about. That's why you guys came, so thank you. Question, can you break down that 1,400 students and say, what programs are they in?
Yeah.
What's their interest? How many are actually getting hired, or how many opportunities for, from an employer standpoint, well, I'm not going to spend all this time learning this process and maybe only get one every couple of years because they're already booked up with some industry
Mhm.
job. Or is there 100 candidates there they get to choose through to find that right one, and should they put that effort into it? So can you break that number?
Yeah.
Is that graduates? That's just
Sure.
people? What does it mean?
We have just under 300 graduate students, so our biggest population is undergrad. And our most popular programs are in the CSET college, so IT, engineering, business is big, aviation is big. I would say probably 80% of the students go on to pursue employment after they graduate. There are some just, which countries they're from, they're going home to work because they got a scholarship to come here to do their work or their school, and they go back home. But I would say the majority of them do try to get OPT, or they move on to the next degree level, and they're just here to they got their eye on the PhD. So I think right now we've got just a little bit under 400 students who are on OPT. And so while they're on OPT, they're still connected to our school. We do their advising through that whole thing. So I wish I had percentages for you, but we're busy. We're busy helping students apply for OPT. Right? All the students who are graduating in December, that's what we're doing right now with them, is helping them apply for OPT, for work authorization to begin after the new year. So, and I would say what makes them have a successful application, and that they have a job offer. They have a job offer when they apply for OPT. So many students do, because they will use that internship they have their last semester, keep that. Their employer wants them, so they just add them to their application that they have a job offer, and they don't lose any work time. On the back end, the authorization is a little different, but they keep the same job and they just keep moving forward. So percentages, let's say a lot. I would say probably 80% of students pursue that employment, and they're successful. I don't even know. I think I've had an OPT application denied once or twice, and it's because they were missing something, missing a document, and government happily took their money and said, try again. Yeah, but they don't, they approve them. Any other questions? I don't want to keep you from your happy hour.
You can join.
I would love to, but I'm going to go to my daughter's volleyball game. Okay, well, thank you. I left some business cards in the back. I also left some really cool stickers to put on your water bottles. There's some swag that we're trying to use up. I'm actually sending 2 people abroad. We're going to Uzbekistan, Egypt, Ethiopia, Kenya, one other place I can't remember. But that's where we're going this fall, recruiting students. And so brought a little extra swag for you. So help yourself. But thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah. You're welcome.
But what about industry? Kim comes from AGCO in Jackson, and she has a pretty unique story that pertains especially to some workers from MSU in engineering. Kim has been in HR for over 29 years, and she graduated both with her bachelor's and master's degrees in HR from Briar Cliff. After spending 18 years with Polaris, she has been with AGCO for 11, where she has been the senior manager for over 7 years. She has 2 daughters, 1 granddaughter, and a grandson on the way within the next week. So thank you for taking the time to be here today. Her husband, Steve, works as an outside salesman for Matheson Gas in Spirit Lake, Iowa. And Kim really brings that extensive experience and background when it comes to employee relations, recruiting, and finance. So we're excited to have Kim, and as an AGCO investor, to be here and present and showcase a bit more about what her organization is doing, what they're looking at, the challenges and the opportunities that arise. So please help me welcome Kim.
Okay, so as Garrett said, I'm Kim Phillips. I am the HR person that everybody's kind of afraid of, I think, sometimes. But and I also work in the industry. But I also have a very good story to tell about successes with visas and with international students. So with that, I'm going to, that's our building. Just to give you guys an idea, I don't know if everybody knows what AGCO is, but we're in Jackson, Minnesota. We make road gators, terrogators, tractors, a facility of about 1,000 employees. Of the 1,000, about 280 of them are engineers. So give you a good idea. We are a global company, and we have plants all over with a total of about 20,000 employees. So I wanted to put these slides in here. I know that my slides are not near as pretty, but I do want to talk a little bit about why it's so important for us to have that talent. It's because, right, everybody needs to hire, everybody needs employees. So we, about 7-8 years ago, really started looking at our internship program and how can we grow that, how can we use those students to try them out, get them acclimated to us, get them networked, and then ultimately hire them. So that's kind of our strategy, is to attract them, develop them, and retain them. With that, there's no path. Erin had that road that went all over. It's exactly the way it is. So it was perfect, and I laughed when she put that up there because that's how I feel. But so a little bit about the program that we have. We have interns, up to 35 every summer. From the interns, before they go back, they, if they're returning, they are not graduating. If we want them to come back, they get a letter to come back way before they even leave for the end of their year. That way we kind of secure them for the next year. And then if they're graduating, if we want to, we have 2 different programs. If we have a full-time position that looks like a good match for them, they'll have a full-time offer before they go back to school. If we don't, but yet they are a very, very good candidate, and obviously we want to retain them, we have a development program. The development program is a 2-year rotational program. So they rotate every 6 months into different areas of our organization. Could be across site, it could be from design engineering to manufacturing engineering to supervision. All of those, and that is based on what the employee wants and what the company needs, so it has to be a win-win relationship. So that's important for you guys to understand, I think, because when we get into sponsorship, it is complicated, and you have to understand how important it is to your organization. I know, I hear the HR person. I am that person. I do all of the visas, and I don't know everything about it, believe me. I have an attorney that I can call, thank God. But what I can tell you is that those of you that are educating the students, you're doing a phenomenal job. They know their visas, and they know where they're supposed to go and what they need to do when they come into your organization. They guide me. Once I can build that relationship with them, then we work together on what their situation is, and that's important because each one's situation is a little bit different. And then we plan out a strategy. What are we going to do? What's our next move? If this happens, where are we going to go next? So the case study I want to talk about is 2 individuals that we did recruit from MSU, came as interns, came through our programs, and obviously we wanted to retain them. So they both came to work for us, and they are significant others, and which makes it complicated a little bit, but very, very rewarding to have 2 very, very important individuals in our organization. So came to us, they were on their OPT, that's perfectly fine. Our transition then is the dreaded H-1B, and I say that because we are that employer that gets stuck in that cap. And so we, as soon as we can possibly apply for that H-1B, it's in February, and we get that done. He gets drawn in the lottery, but she doesn't. So then we're in 2 different situations. She didn't have enough time for her to stay working, so she actually had to go back to school. So she's back in school now, working for us for 20 hours a week. So she'll do that. We will apply again for her H-1B and hope that she can get drawn in that lottery. That's the frustrating part, is you just hope that they can get drawn. I've had them drawn and not drawn. So if she does, that's fine. That would be great. She'd have her H-1B. She'd continue with her school. We did move her to a different role because it will be a role that she can do while she's only working 20 hours a week. So again, being flexible as the employer is the name of the game. Not saying too bad, see ya, glad we got to meet you, because all in all, if we lose her, we probably lose him, and we don't want to lose 2 good employees. So that's the case study that we're in right now. Very challenging. Like I said, they know the process better than I know the process. And I think the key to that is getting a relationship with them and listening to them. Because we're all busy. I don't have extra staff to do just visas. So that's the role that I've taken because it is complicated. I have had a unfortunate situation when I first came to AGCO. I had 0 experience with immigration, none, because at Polaris we did not do any sponsorship. So when I got there, I had an individual working for us, and he was the sweetest guy in the whole world. He had about 15 months left on his OPT, and we were applying for his H-1B. It ended up that he didn't get his application in time. He didn't have any time left, so he actually got kicked out of the country. And I had to tell him that, that he would have to leave until we could figure something out. Now, the sad part was, right, he has an apartment, he has a lease, he has all of that stuff that matters to each one of us. Now, he was a very, very good guy, so we kicked him out of the country. He actually went to another country for us and worked in that facility, continued to work remote for us. 3 months later, he got to come back. We got all his paperwork. He got his green card, and he's a happy guy. So are we. But that's kind of a very, very long story in a nutshell for you guys. And And so I can tell you guys, if you're not looking at immigration, even in the skilled labor, you're probably not going to staff your companies. So you have to be open. I just hired my first TN visa. Don't know much about it, but we're going to figure it out. He's coming from Texas. And we've had that position open for 346 days. So you just, again, looking at every aspect we can. We are hiring, now we're hiring a lot from, not the Dominican, Puerto Rico, but they do not have to have a visa. So that's another avenue that we're looking at, and is bringing people in from there. And I think we have our first 10 starting on the end of October, and October 31st, I think so. But looking at every kind of avenue, and I think somebody said it over here, HR people just do the same old, because that's all the tools they have. And sometimes that is true. But you have to get into these kind of sessions. And, GreenSeam has been huge for us to network with, and employers have to take that time and that step to get out and understand it at least, and not be afraid of it. I mean, it happens, and bad things happen, but you know what? Usually 99% of the time we can work through all of them. So I think I hit on every subject I wanted. I gave you guys kind of the 2 case studies. What about questions about our journey? Yeah.
Do you get a lot of pushback from your managers?
Do I? Yes and no. Managers are scared to death because they want, when you're looking at it from the manager's perspective, they want to hire somebody, they invest all that training in them, they don't want to lose them. So they are truly scared to death. You have to reassure them that, you know what, it'll be okay. Like Arun, when he got kicked out of the country, he could have been so angry at me, but his manager and him, we sat down, we made a plan, we talked to our attorneys, what can we do, what can't we do, because obviously we don't want to get our company in trouble either. And then ultimately it ended up being a win-win, but they are a little bit afraid. You have to be that advocate and tell them it'll be okay, we'll figure it out. But they don't want to lose people that they invest time in. So it's all about productivity and, not having to retrain, because retrain costs money. But if you think about it, there is money involved in, getting somebody's H-1B or ultimately their green card. That's the goal. How rewarding when they do get it, I can tell you that. I probably shed a lot of tears when they come in and they're like, I got it. So it is pretty cool. But the hard part is you invest that money, but guess what? You invested in turnover too. You invested in relocating people. You're investing it anyway. So you just have to look at it in a different perspective. So, but they are afraid, yeah.
Kim, can you expand a little bit on that investment?
Yeah.
As far as not only financially, but time, and what are you looking at when hiring the H-1B? And what recommendation would you have to employers in industry that have that $3,000 to $5,000+ sign-on bonus on their door, that they can't find employees, that there's an option?
Yeah. We've stayed away from a sign-on bonus just on purpose because I think there's better ways to do business. Sign-on bonuses will get you this far, and then that person will leave, and you're just doing it again. So I'm not an advocate of that. But, I think they talked about, you said $2,500 for the H-1B, as a $2,500 for the application, I think. Premium processing. So we'll do that. It costs the manager about $5,000, I think, to get the H-1B. Now, they also have the 3 years to budget for the green card process. So, if they look at it in a big picture, if they would have turned that person over 2 or 3 times, they would have gladly paid for their whole green card. So I think that's the other piece of it is, looking big versus right today and being able to plan for it, get your pipeline built, and that's what we do with our internship program. It's totally our pipeline. But that money could easily go into having somebody here on a visa. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just going to say is I think about the hiring bonuses all the time to fill the worker shortage right now. And I think about the fact that some employers might hire people with whom they have no established history or employer-employee relationship. But if you have an international student complete their CPT with you and then they come back and then they do their OPT and you know their work ethic and you know what it is they want to do, employers would be better to pay toward the H-1B for somebody they know is conscientious, is going to stick at the job, rather than paying a hiring bonus. And I think it would be a good financial investment, but a good investment in that employee and that employer-employee relationship. My job as an international student advisor is, I don't even know how I'd sum it up. It's very complicated, it's very stressful. I run the entire international student program by myself at SCC, from the recruitment phase through OPT and beyond. And it's really difficult. Many of our students are separated from babies, children, spouses.
Yeah.
They give up a lot to be here, and they genuinely do. And so I know that a lot of international students would make great employees eventually for organizations. And it's just to you obviously get to know some of their personal stories. Right now I have a husband and wife team, both of them on H-1 visas, both of them on the nursing program at the same time, with a little 5-year-old son who's on an F2 dependent visa who speaks 5 languages. He's 5. And just the what they bring to the table in terms of, you know, the diversity of our campus as well, and like the workforce is just phenomenal.
Yep, I would totally agree with that. The one thing that I do is, first of all, I try to get to know them really well so that I know their personal situation. But the other thing is getting them together with other visa holders within AGCO so that they have a relationship. Sometimes we have them live in our townhouses so that they're close. Their families get to know each other because, like I said, they are very, very smart and they know their visa and they know what the next steps are. Usually they're more impatient with me because I'm the one that has to learn as I'm going. So that's probably the best advice I can give our employees is just be patient with me. You know, I do care and we will get through it, but I also understand their perspective. You know, it's their life. The situation that I have right now with this husband and wife is not healthy. We have a huge housing shortage in Jackson, Minnesota. And so do they buy a house? Where are they going to live? Do they continue to a lease? Do they not? All those things that, you know, I take for granted. I don't even have to think about being kicked out or doing, you know, not being able to work. So now I have my income cut. So those are all the things that they're going through. And I think that if you understand that and try to put yourself in their shoes a little bit, you will have more success with them. So, but yeah, I do agree. You get to test them out, you get to see them, you get to know them, and honestly, they're building a relationship with your company. And you know, you always say you want your employees to love your company. You want to get their heart. That's what you want with them, and you'll have it if you work with them. So
I can prove that with a stat. I just was at a conference where I had a meeting with the diversity community guy for Tyson, and they found that if they help people get citizenship of their staff, they're able to retain 86% of those for 4 years or longer. And so our organization is part of a program with that, but the thing that they said from an HR standpoint, what this does, the kind of loyalty that it brings, is our Tyson's turnover rate or cost is about over $20,000. It's like 21, 26, something like that, to replace that person and train them and get them. And it's like a 6-month process to at least get them up to where it's functioning where they want it.
correct.
But we can throw $1,000, couple $1,000 at citizenship.
Yep.
And we keep them.
Yep. That's so true. Yeah, it costs me about $5,000 to onboard an assembler or a welder. So each one that I turn over I think about it, it easily pays for one of them to get through the process. And that's just within the first 30 days. That isn't even all the way, through a year with them. So it is very expensive. Turnover is ridiculous, but nobody looks at that cost. They just say, get me employees, get me employees. So it's a great way to look at it. So. Good.
We're 10
Yeah.
after 5.
Oh, sorry.
I do have an exciting thing here because we will be breaking out the beer and wine. We do have meat, cheese, crackers, and some other things, but can we please give Kim a round of applause? Thank you, Kim. But before I let you go and indulge here a bit, we're going to continue the conversations, but think about that story, those stories that we heard today, the return on investment, that there is a process and it does work. It's not a straight line, but you can get there. And so think about those that are in your network that didn't attend this event. You can direct them to the video, but invite them to the next. Let them know that there are groups coming together, whether it's GreenSeam, it's Kivu in Worthington, it's Region 9, it's the universities in higher ed. It really does take all components of this to come together to make it happen. And so again, invite them to that next event. PowerPoints will be sent out, if it's okay with the presenters, to those that attended. If I don't have your email, I don't have you. So if your email isn't on that list, I can't send it to you. So be sure to have that added. There are a few new faces in the room. And so if we haven't connected before, please grab my card. Let's chat. We're not just going to chat about GreenSeam, we're going to chat about your organization and how we can help you and how we can connect and align the dots, because what happens here impacts the region. I will leave out a teaser here because through membership and partnership with the Main Street Businesses Focused on Food and Ag grant, we have the opportunity to allocate program dollars that can support an organization located across the region that is less than 500 employees with a cost, an initial $500 to support that initial consultation. We will then match 25% of those dollars and up to $3,000 to help alleviate the cost. And so we talk about the return on investment of an employer taking that step and spending $5,000. We just reduced that by a little over 25%. So consider that, reach out to us, inform those within your network, and I hope that we can continue these conversations, extend that dialogue into this happy hour and social hour. But I want to give another big round of applause to those that attended and to our fantastic speakers, so thank you.